Did Pope Leo the 14th just say that you can't be Catholic and pro abortion? That's what we're going to take a look at coming up next. So, welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. Look, I got to admit outright, it would be pretty awesome if Pope Leo came out and said, you can't be Catholic and pro abortion, because I think that that is theologically true. But is that what the Pope has said? That's the question that we're going to explore today. Before we dive in, however, I want to remind you, if you appreciate the content of this channel and you like the topics and the work that I do, hit that subscribe button and the like button. Let me share my screen and show you what one news outlet is reporting. We see LifeSite News saying, breaking, Pope Leo tells politicians you can't be Catholic and pro-abortion. I mean, that's quite the headline, right? And pretty incredible statement if the Pope said it. But did he say it? That is the question. Well, of course, they point us to an article that they wrote here at lifenews.com. And it says Pope Leo has issued a clarion call to Catholic politicians worldwide, urging them to align their actions with the Church's teaching on the sanctity of life. They state Pope Leo firmly rejected the false notion of Catholic politicians saying they are personally pro-life, but voting for pro-abortion. We've heard some politicians say that before, right? Well, in fact, I think Joe Biden was one of them. Personally, I'm against this, but I'm a politician and I have to represent the people. And so I'm going to vote for abortion, even if I'm against it. Well, look, you can't do that. You can't separate your views from your conduct and your role as a politician. It's just really not possible to do that. That's like saying, on the one hand, I am personally a loving father, but in my capacity as a father, I'm going to starve my children. No, look, it's one or the other. You either love your children and you feed them, or you're going to starve them and you hate them. There's no, this distinction between personally, but in my office as, yeah, no, that doesn't work. And so that rightly needs to be called out. But is that exactly what Pope Leo the 14th said? Well, they're saying it is. And they cite an article here from Diane Montanga. So when we go to her article, it's a little bit different. She says Pope Leo to Catholic politicians defend natural law, oppose anti-Christian party directives. And I looked through her article. I don't see anything about pro-life, pro-abortion, or anything like that. She does include a full transcript of what the Pope said, and she actually was kind enough to provide a link to what the Pope said on the Vatican website. And so when you go to the Vatican website, actually there's nothing in here about abortion, nothing in here about pro-life, nothing in here about if you are a pro-abort politician, you can't be a Catholic, nothing at all along those lines. However, what the original article quotes as substantiating that claim is this right here from the original speech of Leo, where he says, so Monsignor Blanket asked me for advice to give you. The first and only advice I will give you is to unite yourselves more and more to Jesus. Let me see here. To unite yourself more and more to Jesus, to live by it and to bear witness to it. There is no separation in the personality of a public figure. There is not on one side the politician and on the other Christian. But there is the politician who, under the gaze of God and his conscience, lives his commitments and responsibilities in a Christian way. To which I want to say amen. And I wholeheartedly agree with what Pope Leo is saying there. And I'm very glad that he says it. Look, you can't be this hypocrite where you say one thing on the one hand, but then say something else as a politician. And one of those cases is where some of them will say, I am pro-abortion as a politician, but personally I'm not. But though that's one thing that some of these politicians do, that's not something that he explicitly says here, nor does he say anywhere here that you can't be a Catholic and pro-abortion. Now, again, personally, I think you cannot be a Catholic and pro-abortion. I don't think that you can. I think that you're denying something that is definitive in Catholicism, and you might as well just admit to people you're not a Catholic. And it's disingenuous to say you're a Catholic and to say you're pro abortion. And I don't care how you spin it as a politician, you're just not a Catholic at the end of the day. Period. End of story, full stop. So, I mean, I agree with the sentiment, but I do have to point out I don't see anything in here about saying you can't be pro abortion and still be a Catholic. So, the original headline here, Pope Leo tells Catholic politicians you can't be Catholic and pro abortion, was evidently derived from this in the general audience that really doesn't necessarily mean that, because the way I've seen these pro abort Catholic politicians, quote unquote Catholic politicians, try to spin it is they will say that they are living according to their conscience and their commitment and being responsible in a Christian way. And yet they're still in their policies going to vote pro abortion. So it wouldn't be enough to just simply say there is no separation in the personality of a public figure. There's not on the one side the politician and on the other Christian. That's not enough to refute such people. They have to be called out directly and specifically. And you have to say, look, you can't call yourself a Catholic and be pro abortion. Unfortunately, Pope Leo did not say that. And I knew he didn't say that. You know how I knew that? Because I recall listening to his speech just a few years before being made a pope about the seamless garment. I actually reviewed that here on this channel, and I knew based on what he was saying there that Pope Leo would never say, unfortunately, he would never say that you can't be Catholic and pro-abortion. I knew he wouldn't say that because of what I heard him say as a cardinal. So I knew already the headline sounded suspect. And I thought, well, either he's significantly changed his position, or this is another one of those headlines that's misleading. And they're taking one thing and then turning it into something else and kind of reading their own interpretation and their own agenda into the text. And frankly, I wish it were true. In this case, I wish they were right. I have to be honest with you and tell you, yeah, no, that's not what the Pope said. And this is really unfortunate because I think that when people dig a little deeper and they find out that the Pope didn't say that, they're going to end up being really disappointed. Um, and, again, maybe Pope Leo should come out and say such a thing, but he hasn't. And so some people, this is one of the reasons why some people have come to the conclusion that Catholic media on the whole is incredibly dishonest, because this is exactly what happened under Pope Leo right now and also under Pope Francis. It happened in a different direction. A lot of times Catholic media tried to make Pope Francis out to be more liberal than he was. And now Catholic media is trying to make Pope Leo out to be more traditional than he is. And in reality, Pope Leo is somewhere in between. He's not what we would like to see if you're looking for a really traditional perspective, but he's also not a flaming liberal. He's somewhere in between. And you can see that in his appointments, which we'll talk about in a future episode. New appointments have just been made. They leave a lot to be desired. There's a few good appointments in there. There's also some very troubling appointments. We've been waiting on Pope Leo to come out and tell us, okay, who's going to be over this dicastery? What are your decisions? And it's exactly what, the experts expected. There would be some good and there would be some bad. Not surprising, right? So it's just kind of how things have been. But a lot of people have lost confidence in Catholic media because often, instead of just reporting the story, they'll put a spin on it and they will read their own agenda into the words of the Pope, whether it's to make him more liberal leaning or to make him more traditional leaning. We see with liberal news outlets, Catholic or secular, they'll try to make the Pope look out to be pro homosexuality, pro women's ordination, pro whatever liberal agenda they want. And it's usually not accurate in the way that they depict the Pope. But on the other hand, we'll see traditional outlets, whether Catholic or not, try to depict the Pope in a way that he also, unfortunately, isn't. So again, for better or worse, whether you like it or not, it is what it is. And a lot of these news outlets, especially Catholic, don't always give you an accurate portrayal and just report the news and tell you what he says. They try to put a spin on it in one way or another. And again, I think that that's very unfortunate. Um, I think that we deserve better. People deserve better. And I think that you just need to report the information and let the chips fall where they may. So this is one of those another one of those unfortunate incidents where things are just kind of being spun, but this time it's being spun in the opposite direction than how we saw things being spun often with Pope Francis. Not that Pope Francis didn't have some statements that, even without a spin, were problematic. I've pointed that out before. Um, but a lot of times he was distorted, and we're seeing people do that with Pope Leo, but just in the opposite direction. And that is very, very unfortunate. Like I said, we're going to take a look at these new appointments coming up soon. So if that's something that you want to watch, you want me to review with you, go over these new appointments, why some of them are good, why some of them are troubling and concerning. Let me know. I need to hear feedback from you if this is something that's of interest to the audience. If not, there's plenty of other topics that we can explore together. So just let me know your feedback there in the comment section. Of course, hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. Also, check out my courses at rtcourses.com, R as in reason, T as in theology, courses.com. I just added a number of courses on the magisterium there. These are the very courses that I teach at a Catholic university: Introduction to the Magisterium, the history of the magisterium, and how to evaluate magisterial documents. And so you will get a university, Catholic university level education right here if you purchase any or all of these newly added courses. So rtcourses.com. There's other courses that you can explore there, as well as free resources that I think you'll appreciate and enjoy. So rtcourses.com. And of course, as I always tell y'all, check me out at Patreon, patreon.com/reason of theology, if you want to support this channel so I can continue to offer content to everyone for free every day. All right, we'll see you later.